The outskirts of Karsus. 9 weren't much more than concrete, steel, and heat. Dust coated every surface. Turrets mounted on the walls tracked movement automatically, their red sensors blinking like tired eyes. The gate was a rusted slab of reinforced metal, more symbolic than secure. No one was attacking this place. Not anymore. They'd won. I wasn't supposed to stop here. My name is Cale Trent, 41 years old, former field medic, Earth Fleet, dishonorably discharged for assaulting a commanding officer. Now, I run salvage routes out in the driftlands, trading scrap and replacement parts to colonies on the fringe. I keep my head down. Fix what's broken. Don't look too long at anything that bleeds. Karsus was a refuel point. Nothing more. I needed a thermal regulator, a few compressor lines, and maybe a replacement NAV array if the price was right. In and out. Avoid the locals. The war might have ended 2 cycles ago, but here, nobody told the ground troops. This was still a combat zone in their eyes. Still us versus them. I pulled up just before noon. The heat shimmered off the walls like glass. My truck's vents struggled against the rising temperature. As I stepped out, my boots sank into the dry silt. The wind blew warm and dry, kicking up sand against the front armor plates. Then I saw her. She was chained to a steel pole outside the city's outer wall, just past the checkpoint. No shade, no cover. Arms raised above her, wrists clamped in iron cuffs that looked recycled from old mining gear. Her body sagged with exhaustion, but she was still conscious. She looked young, 20, maybe 25 by human standards. Her skin was a pale silver blue, the kind I'd seen on Veltherian captives during the war. It was blistered in places. Dried blood clung to her arms. Her ceremonial robe, what remained of it, barely covered her. It had once been white. Now it was a mixture of dirt, sweat, and sun-bleached fabric clinging to her figure in uneven strips. She didn't scream, didn't cry. Her lips were dry and cracked, but her eyes were open, focused on the desert beyond the fence. Not on the guards, not on the people who passed, just the horizon. I froze. There were protocols, even for prisoners. Public exposure like this, it wasn't punishment. It was spectacle. One of the guards noticed me looking. A tall guy with a scar over his lip and an outdated rifle slung over his shoulder. He leaned on the fence, drinking something from a metal flask. "You haven't seen one like her before?" he asked. I didn't answer. "She's Velther. Killed one of our officers last week. Ripped his throat out with her bare hands. Took 3 men to bring her down." I looked at the girl again. She didn't look like a soldier now. She looked like someone surviving on willpower alone. "She speak?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Not much. Maybe once, asking for water." That was day 1. I looked away and walked inside. I needed to finish my business and leave. The market was 6 rows of welded stalls and scavenge parts laid out on scrap metal tables. Mechanics bartered over busted exosuit joints. A merc in a stained jacket yelled into a comm unit. The smell of burning plastic and engine coolant hung heavy in the air. I bought what I needed quickly and avoided conversation. But I kept thinking about her. Her eyes, the stillness in her posture. Like she wasn't waiting to be saved. Just waiting. I tried to justify it. I didn't know her. She could have killed dozens. Velther warriors were fanatical, trained from adolescence to die for their caste. But that didn't explain why she'd been left to rot on a pole instead of processed or executed. That was punishment for show, for fear. By dusk, I was sitting in the cab of my truck with the engine off, fingers clenched on the steering wheel. The Part 1 bot were stored behind me, strapped down and wrapped. I got what I came for. Still, I didn't start the engine. I didn't move for nearly an hour. That night, after the gates closed and the sentries rotated, I made my decision. I checked my gear, flashlight, bolt cutters, gloves, a needle injector with a mild sedative in case she resisted. I threw a blanket into the back of the truck, unlocked the side hatch, and moved out under low moonlight. The guards weren't paying attention. One was asleep. The other sat smoking near the far tower. I stayed low, moving between crates and scrap piles until I reached the outer fence. She didn't flinch when I approached, just looked at me with the same empty expression. Her lips moved slightly, but no words came out. Her body was weak, muscles barely holding her weight. I stepped up, looked at the rusted cuff hinges. They weren't complicated. "I'm going to cut you down," I said, voice low. "You scream, I walk away." Her gaze locked onto mine. No fear, just exhaustion and a strange kind of clarity. I cut the chain. She collapsed instantly. I caught her. Her body was warm from fever, skin burning under the grime. She weighed less than I expected. Bones, tendons, and nothing else. Her head fell against my shoulder, breath shallow. I carried her across the yard and into the back of my hauler. Closed the hatch. Kicked the engine on. No alarms. No shouting. The gate guards didn't notice. I drove, hard and fast, south toward the driftlands, away from roads, away from eyes. An hour later, she spoke, barely audible, voice like torn paper. "Why?" I glanced at her through the rear mirror. Her eyes were open, watching me. Alert. "I don't know," I admitted. She didn't respond. Just pulled the blanket tighter around her body and closed her eyes. We drove in silence across the flat sands, the truck's headlights cutting through the dark. My hand stayed locked on the wheel, jaw clenched tight. I knew what I'd just done, and I knew there would be no going back. The desert swallowed everything: sound, light, and certainty. By the time I cut the engine, we were 50 kilometers out from Carsus 9. The relay station I stopped at had been dead for years, an old mining checkpoint half buried in sand and shadow. One collapsed comms tower, a half-standing shack, and a faded warning sign in 4 languages. But it had a roof, and it was off-grid. I parked behind a broken structure and powered down the hauler. No lights, no signal, just wind scraping over metal and the distant groan of cooling pipes. Avern hadn't moved in over an hour. I stepped around back, opened the hatch, and crouched beside her. Her eyes were open again, still alert, still watching me. "Can you stand?" I asked. She didn't answer. I reached under her shoulders and legs, lifted her carefully. Her skin radiated heat, fever. Her breathing came slow and shallow. Up close, the damage was worse than I'd thought. Blisters, bruises, blood crusted along her back and arms. The iron cuffs had torn the skin around her wrists down to raw muscle. I carried her into the shelter, laid her on the bench inside. The structure smelled of oxidized metal and animal droppings. I cleared the worst of the dust, laid down a thermal pad, and covered her again. She was trembling, but she didn't cry out once. I opened my med pack and got to work. Saline flush, skin sealant, antibiotic patches. She winced but didn't resist. When I reached for the sedative, her hand caught my wrist. "No drugs," she said, voice hoarse but clear. "Painkillers," I replied. "Not enough to knock you out." She hesitated, then nodded. I injected the dose into her upper arm and kept treating the injuries in silence. I focused on the work: pressure bandages, hydration line, nutrient stim. I'd done this 100 times before. Not like this, though. Not with someone who'd just been left to die as a message. She spoke again when I wrapped her wrist. "Why are you helping me?" I looked her in the eye. "Because no one else did." That seemed to register. Her expression didn't soften, but it changed, like she was recalculating who I was. "You were in the war," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. "Combat medic. For years. Frontier Corps." "Which side? Does it matter?" She didn't respond. Her breathing slowed, her eyes closed. I didn't sleep that night. I sat against the wall, rifle in my lap, listening to the wind hammering the outside panels. At one point, she murmured something in her language, Velthiri. I didn't understand the words, but the tone wasn't angry. It was almost resigned. By morning, she was conscious and able to sit up. Her body shook with the effort, but she didn't ask for help. I gave her a protein ration and a canister of water. She took both, eating slowly, eyes locked on mine the entire time. "Your name?" she asked. "Kale." "Avern," she said. "I know." She studied me for a moment. "They'll come after you." "I know that too." "You should have left me." I didn't answer. She looked away, staring at the broken tower outside. I was supposed to die there. "Do you want to go back?" "No." We sat in silence. Then she asked the question I'd expected. "What do you want from me?" The directness hit harder than it should have. Not suspicious, just calculating. Like she couldn't afford to assume good intentions. "Nothing," I said. "You're free." That confused her more than anything else I'd said. She didn't argue, just went quiet again, processing. Later, I checked the truck systems. We had 2 days of water, fuel to make it to the next GO station, and no active tracker. I knew better than to trust that. "They chipped you?" I asked. She nodded once. "Where?" "Back shoulder. Shallow." I grabbed a scanner, found the chip, and sterilized the scalpel. "This will hurt." She didn't flinch when I cut it out. She just watched the device drop into the ashtray beside us. That night, we moved again. No lights, no comms. Avron lay in the back, conserving energy. I drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes on the horizon, every dune a possible trap. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I had no plan, but she was alive. And Karsus, 9 had already noticed she was missing. They'd be coming. We weren't ready for them, but neither was I ready to hand her back. Not after what they did. Not after the way she looked at that horizon, like she still believed there was something beyond it worth surviving for. We drove through the night, guided only by moonlight and the flickering navigation unit embedded in the dash, half malfunctioning, constantly correcting itself. The desert stretched endless in every direction. No roads, no signal towers, just sand, fractured stone, and cold air creeping through the vents. Avron stayed silent most of the ride. She lay stretched out in the rear cabin, eyes half open, tracking shadows like a soldier. Every so often, she shifted her arm or adjusted the blanket around her. The pain was still visible in her face, tight jaw, clenched fingers, but she didn't complain. Around 0300, I stopped near the base of a shallow canyon, tight enough to hide the truck, wide enough for a quick exit. I powered down, killed the heat core, and opened the rear door. "We need rest," I said. She didn't argue. I helped her down, careful with her wounds. She moved better now, slow but steady, no longer collapsing under her own weight. The fever had broken. Her breathing was cleaner. Inside the canyon wall was an old evac shelter, military built, buried in rock and left behind after the war ended. I found it years ago during salvage run and kept the location off-grid. The keypad still worked. The lights flickered on weakly, illuminating the narrow corridor and steel bunks. We stepped inside. Avron took a seat on the lower bunk, breathing out slowly as she lowered herself. I handed her a thermal canister, hot broth, protein-packed. She sipped it slowly, keeping her eyes on me. "What's your plan?" she asked. "I'm working on that." "Not good enough," she said bluntly. I didn't argue. "You took me from a military-controlled zone," she added. "They won't let that slide." "I know." She set the canister aside. "So why do it?" I looked at her. "Because I've seen prisoners. I've seen battlefield executions. And what they did to you wasn't about justice. They left me for people to see. And for people to stop caring." She studied me. And for the first time since I cut her down, her face softened. Just a little. Enough to suggest the question she hadn't asked yet. "Who was the officer you hit?" I asked carefully. She didn't answer right away. "Then, Colonel Jarek. He ordered the execution of the Velther civilians we surrendered with. I killed him before he finished the order." I nodded slowly. "They said it was an ambush." "They always do." There was no emotion in her voice. Just fact. It made sense now. She wasn't just some insurgent. She was a ranking priestess, probably held command during the war. The kind of figurehead that made occupation forces nervous. I sat across from her on the opposite bunk. "They'll track us. Once they ID my truck, we're flagged. You could still leave me." "I won't." She tilted her head, skeptical. "You don't even know me." "Doesn't matter." A long pause. Then something shifted in her voice. "Most humans wouldn't have looked twice." "I'm not most." That made her smile, barely. Later, while she rested, I checked the truck's comm scanner. I expected static. Instead, I caught a faint encrypted ping, a patrol frequency bouncing off the lower canyons. Human search units, less than 30 clicks west. They knew. I returned to the shelter, checked my rifle, then roused her gently. "We've got company. Fast movers." She sat up, eyes sharp. "Combat. Not yet, but close." She pulled herself upright, unsteady but determined. "I can walk." "Barely. Then we fight." I hesitated. She met my eyes. "If they find us, they won't arrest us. They'll They'll make an example. You know that. I did. We left the shelter 10 minutes later. She took a sidearm from my kit and checked the power cell with practiced ease. No hesitation. No flinching. Even injured, she was composed, like the pain didn't register anymore. We hiked up the slope of the canyon, found a perch overlooking the approach route. The sand was still undisturbed, but the sound of repulsor engines in the distance carried through the night air. 3 vehicles. Light class. Recon armor. I gave her a look. They'll sweep in 30 minutes. Maybe less. She nodded. We disable the first, retreat east. If we can hit the sensors on the lead unit, the others will pause. Buy us time, I said. Just enough. When they came into view, I watched her. Not the targets. Her. She steadied her breath, checked her grip, narrowed her focus. Whatever else she was, priestess, prisoner, she was also a fighter. When the lead vehicle crossed the ridge, she raised her arm, aimed, and fired. The EMP charge exploded against the side of the repulsor chassis, sending sparks through the air. The vehicle spun out, crashing against a rock face. The second halted, confused. We didn't wait. I grabbed her arm, and we ran. Through dry ravines and broken terrain, we moved faster than I thought possible for someone in her condition. She didn't stumble, didn't slow. We ran until the sun began to rise, until the signals faded behind us. We didn't win that fight, but we survived it, and that was enough for now. We reached the basin of a long-dead river by midday. The rocks were smoother here, worn down by water that hadn't flowed in decades. The sun was brutal. No wind, no cover. Our boots left prints in the fine sand, long lines of them. Easy to follow. We needed to vanish. I found a hollow under a slab of rock where the heat didn't choke. We settled there, breathing heavy, clothes soaked with sweat. I checked Avern's bandages. The wounds on her wrists had started to split open again, dried blood seeping through the wraps. She didn't complain. She only looked toward the horizon, like she always did, always looking away from people. I cleaned the wounds. You're pushing too hard. She pulled her arm back gently. We can't afford to stop. You'll collapse. Then you'll carry me again, she said, flat but not unkind. You think this is sustainable? No, she replied. But survival isn't sustainable. It just continues. I leaned back against the rock wall, stared at her. You ever plan on telling me who you were before all this? I asked. You already know. Priestess, I said. Commander. She looked down. Velthur call at Satel, venerable. The title doesn't translate cleanly. I oversaw spiritual rites, military decisions, civil arbitration, enduring war, last rites before execution. So, executioner. She nodded. And mourner. I watched her for a moment. The way she spoke about death, it was practical. No drama. But something lingered in her voice. Regret, maybe, or something heavier. And you? She asked. Why'd you get discharged? I hesitated, then answered. I hit a superior officer. He ordered me to treat a civilian hostage only after we were done using her for leverage. Said the bleeding could wait. Her expression didn't change, but I knew she understood. You regret it? She asked. No, I said, but I regret not hitting him harder. We were quiet again for a while. She leaned her head back, eyes half closed. Why do you keep looking east? I asked. She opened her eyes. Velthur myth. We believe our ancestors returned from the eastern sky, the old worlds. I don't believe in spirits, but sometimes I look because it reminds me that I used to. I nodded. Sometimes I look because I don't want to see what's behind. A shadow passed over us. I turned my head sharply, hand going to my weapon. It wasn't a ship, just a bird. A glider hawk, circling the rocks above. We needed to keep moving. We hiked through the afternoon, heading deeper into the fractures, giant cracks in the desert surface from old seismic activity. I'd used these routes before, long ago. They distorted sensor pings, gave just enough cover to break a trail. But it slowed us, and then we hit something unexpected. Ruins. Not ancient. Not Velthur. Human. It was a half-buried outpost, old colonial era. Faded Republic crest over a sunken doorway. I forced the hatch open. The interior was intact. Bunk modules, a basic med station, food synth still operational. We stepped inside cautiously. The lights flickered but held. No signs of movement. No recent disturbance. This place isn't on any registry, I said. Off the books, Avron murmured. Early colonists used these to avoid tax monitors. We found rest there. Real rest. She showered first. Not out of modesty, out of priority. Her skin needed care. I waited outside. When she stepped out wrapped in a towel, her hair wet and darker than before, her eyes met mine briefly. Still guarded, but something different lingered. I don't want you to think this means trust, she said. I don't, but it does mean respect. That mattered, more than I expected. Later, while she slept, I accessed the outpost's internal systems. Nothing connected to the grid, but I managed to power the old long-range scanner. I kept it passive, just listening. They were still looking. Intermittent chatter, encrypted but faint. Patrols had spread north and west. We were lucky. For now, I checked the perimeter twice. Nothing. When I returned, she was awake, sitting up in the bunk, staring at me. You could leave now, she said. Take your truck. Be gone before they sweep again. I could. And yet you stay. You need backup. Don't lie. I sat down across from her. I stayed, I said carefully, because leaving you behind never stopped feeling wrong. Not in the war. Not now. She studied me. And for the first time, the walls in her expression lowered. There's something you're not saying, she said. I nodded. When they arrested you, they already knew who you were, didn't they? Her voice dropped. Yes. So you weren't just left to die. You were marked. Silenced. She nodded again. I was speaking against the trade accords. Human forces had begun negotiating with a splinter faction, ones who would sell us out in exchange for power. I refused to endorse the treaty. They needed me to vanish. That was it. Not a prisoner. Not a criminal. A political liability. I'm not just running from guards, she said. I'm running from people who want the war to end on their terms, with the right traitors in power. I leaned forward. Then we find someone who still gives a damn. Broadcast what they did. Force a hearing. She shook her head. We do that, they'll kill everyone we meet. Every place we stop. Then we get to them first. She looked at me. Long, hard. Evaluating. You really want to fight this? No, but I'm tired of walking away. That night, as the outpost lights dimmed and the wind howled through the cracks in the wall, she moved closer to my bunk. Not touching. Just near. We won't make it out of this, she said quietly. Maybe not, I replied. But if we do, what then? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. But her presence next to me, that closeness after days of cold space and brutal truths, said enough. The warning came before dawn. A faint shift in the scanner's readout. A pattern in the static, pulse deliberate. Not natural interference. A scout drone. Small, high altitude, silent. It hadn't pinged our exact location yet, but it was close enough to tighten my chest. I shut the scanner down, walked quickly to the living quarters. Avron was already awake, crouched near the wall, her back pressed against the cold steel. She had the sidearm in her lap, half dressed in scavenged gear from the outpost supply rack. Old Earth Fleet fatigues cut to fit her frame. She didn't look surprised when I entered. They found us, she asked. Not yet, but they will. She stood slowly, her expression focused. Then we burn the outpost and move. I hesitated. We're low on fuel. And food. We run again. We're just delaying it. Her jaw tightened. So maybe it's time we stop running. She looked at me hard. I saw the calculation in her eyes again. An internal scale weighing risk, odds, and necessity. But there was something else too, fatigue. Not just physical. A weariness that had settled deep and permanent. If we stay, she said, we kill whoever comes through that door. We hold, I corrected, not slaughter. Hold, document, signal. We force them to admit what they're doing out here. And if they won't, then we do what we have to. She nodded once. We moved fast, packed what we could, disabled the truck's beacon, rerouted power to the outpost's old defense grid. It was mostly ornamental, 2 short-range pulse turrets, 1 half-functional drone with a cracked lens, but we could rig enough traps to slow down a small unit. In the command room, I found a working broadcast node. I linked it to my wrist unit, began recording. This is Kale Tren, former Earth Fleet medic. I'm here with Avron of Velthur, targeted without due process, tortured without trial. We have visual records of her injuries, her ID chip, and her testimony. If we disappear, no, it wasn't an accident. Averin stood behind me as I spoke. She said nothing, but her presence was like gravity. When I finished, she placed her hand gently on my shoulder. You didn't have to include my name. I know. Why did you? Because truth without names is just noise. She didn't reply, but she stayed close. We waited. The first sign was a ripple in the dust near the ridge, barely visible, like heat distortion. A recon team, cloaked, approaching on foot. Efficient. Not local militia. Special division. Professional. They're not here to capture, Averin said. Her voice was low and even. I know. We took positions. I manned the old repeater on the north side. She took the perimeter, setting 2 plasma charges near the entry slope. They came in fast. 3 ahead, 2 flanking. Full body armor. Silenced weapons. One of them used Velthur combat signs, an insult to her people that didn't go unnoticed. She stiffened beside me when she saw it through the lens. I took the first shot. Hit clean, center chest. The body dropped and vanished behind the ridge. That started it. The turrets kicked in, spitting red pulses across the rocks. Plasma charges lit up the side path. 2 more soldiers went down, one screaming, one silent. But the rest advanced. We fell back to the lower floor. Narrower corridors. Less exposure. Closed quarters. Averin didn't hesitate. She moved like the officer she once was, direct, precise. She disabled a soldier with a blade to the neck, took his weapon, and covered our left flank. I held the stairwell. 3 more came at once. I dropped one. Averin got the second. The third clipped me shoulder. I staggered, fell back. She was at my side instantly, dragging me behind cover. You're hit, she said. Just a scratch. She gave me a look. That's a lot of blood for a scratch. I smiled through the pain. I bleed dramatically. The last 2 soldiers didn't retreat. They triggered an explosive charge on the upper floor, collapsed part of the structure. Dust and fire rained down. We covered our heads, coughed through the haze. When it cleared, the silence was total. We moved carefully, weapons raised, checking bodies. All down. I leaned against the wall, pressure on my shoulder, breathing heavy. That didn't send enough, I muttered. They didn't expect resistance, Averin said. Outside, smoke rose into the early sky. We knew it wasn't over. We had to leave before reinforcements arrived. I transmitted the recorded message, pinged it through 5 unlisted frequencies. Then we stripped what gear we could, loaded the truck, and rolled out, northeast, toward the old satellite fields where no one patrolled. As we drove, she spoke. You could have left me in that cell. I wouldn't have blamed you. I would have, I said. She looked at me, long and quiet. You still don't know what I've done, she said. Doesn't matter. It might. Not to me. She turned away, eyes on the horizon again. But her hand stayed resting between us. Not touching mine, just near, and she didn't move it. We reached the outskirts of the satellite fields by late evening. The terrain shifted, no longer soft dunes and canyons, but jagged rock plains littered with the remains of orbital communication dishes. Cracked panels jutted from the earth like broken bones. Some still hummed faintly, catching solar residue and spitting it back into dead sky. No patrols came this far. Too remote. Too irradiated from old orbital strikes. It made it the perfect place to disappear. Averin rested her head against the passenger window. Her eyes were closed, but I knew she wasn't asleep. She hadn't fully slept since I cut her down. Not once. Even now, her fingers remained close to the grip of the stolen sidearm on her lap. I didn't blame her. I hadn't slept either. The truck rattled over rough terrain. Each bump sent a dull ache through my wounded shoulder, now stitched and sealed but still raw. She dressed it earlier that day, silent, efficient, hands steady even when she winced from her own pain. There's a listening post ahead, I said, watching the terrain unfold. An old rebel site. They used it to broadcast pirate signals during the occupation. Still functional? She asked without opening her eyes. Half. Maybe. If the power cells haven't decayed. She nodded faintly. Then we use it. 10 minutes later, we stopped in front of a structure built into a hillside, partially collapsed, reinforced with black alloy. I drew my weapon and approached first. The outer locks were rusted but intact. I forced the door with a pry tool, and we stepped inside. It smelled of ozone and corrosion. The main room was coated in dust. Equipment stood dormant, screens dark, cables severed. A bunk in the corner still held a ratty thermal blanket, long abandoned. I swept the room. No movement. No signs of recent entry. Avern stepped in behind me, scanning the space. We'll need a signal booster. There's one in the back room. Or was. She moved ahead before I could stop her. I followed, more out of instinct than distrust. We found the transmitter, mostly intact. I started work immediately, pulling old fiber links and reconnecting what I could to my wrist unit. The process took time. Quiet hours. Tension returned, not between us but around us like static in the air. Something was shifting, unspoken. When the power surged, the transmitter blinked weakly. Got it, I said. She came closer, arms crossed, watching the screen come alive. Can you reach anything off-world? No, but we can bounce a message through the Blackfield relay. It'll take days, but if someone's listening, they'll get it. And if they're not, then we make sure we're loud enough to be noticed. I paused, then added, we'll need to include your name again. I know, she said quietly. She stood in front of the terminal. I hit record. My name is Avern Telvera, formerly of House Marnex, Velthur. I'm alive. I was taken from neutral territory, held without charge, tortured, and sentenced without trial. The human command structure has endorsed war crimes against my people and concealed political assassination behind fabricated charges. I will testify. She didn't look at me while she spoke. Her voice didn't waver. When she was done, she stepped back. I transmitted it. Silence followed, a silence heavy with consequences. We sat in the corner, near the old bunk, splitting rations. The canned synth meat tasted like salted metal. Neither of us cared. How many people did you kill? I asked. She didn't look offended. During the war? 43 confirmed. Dozens more in defense of Velthur space. I nodded. Civilians? She paused. Once. An accident. I was given bad intel. We raided a refugee transport we believed to be smuggling arms. There were children inside. I gave the order. She didn't try to justify it. She didn't have to. War didn't offer purity. Only decisions. Do you carry that? I asked. Every day, she said. It's why I didn't scream. When they chained me up, when they laughed, I thought maybe I deserved it. You didn't. You don't know that. I know what it feels like to wish punishment on yourself. She looked at me sharply. You? I failed my unit. During a medevac op, I prioritized an officer's injuries. A choice. The others died before I could return. I still see their faces. Silence hung between us again, but this time, it wasn't a barrier. It was shared. That night, we didn't sleep separately. She leaned into me on the floor of the old station, her hand on my chest, her breath steady. Nothing more than contact. No sex. No pretense. Just warmth. Just presence. Sometime near dawn, the transmitter beeped. I rolled over, checked the signal. A reply. Not from Earth. From orbit. Encrypted. Unverified. But the words were clear. We receive your message. Stand by. Avern sat upright beside me. They found us? She asked. I shook my head. Not yet. Someone else did. She looked at me, more alert now. Who? We'll find out soon. She reached for her gear. If it's not them, she said, we're still running. If it is, we might have a chance. The message didn't come from any known channel. It was buried in an outdated encryption protocol used by fringe diplomatic envoys before the war, decommissioned, obsolete, supposedly shut down. But someone had brought it back online, just long enough to reply. We received your message. Stand by. Avern didn't sleep after that. Neither did I. We kept checking the transmitter every 15 minutes, searching for follow-up signals, patterns, pings. Nothing. Static and dead air. But something had changed. The air felt tighter. The silence had intent now. By midday, we saw the ship. It came in low from the northern edge of the satellite field. No lights, no flags, matte black hull reflecting the dead sun. A Corvette-class skimmer. Older model. Not military standard. Civilian retrofitted, likely for speed and low orbit entry. It touched down 2 clicks away, just behind a broken ridge line. We kept low and approached on foot, cutting through the wreckage-strewn field. Avra moved slower now. Her legs were stiff from the previous firefight, and the bruises on her ribs had darkened overnight. But she didn't say a word about the pain. She adjusted her belt, tightened her grip on the sidearm, and kept pace. At the ridge, we paused. The ship's ramp was down. Two figures stood outside, one in a dark scarf, the other in a worn exo jacket with an orange insignia over the left breast. Avern tensed. I know that symbol. Whose is it? Velthur Diaspora. Refugee Alliance. They stayed neutral during the war. I checked the angle of their posture, the way their hands stayed visible. No weapons drawn. They were waiting for us. We stepped into view. The one in the scarf raised a hand in a slow, deliberate motion. Avern Telvera. She nodded. I'm Commander Nira Salas. This is Kale Tran, correct? Yeah, I said. You're not Earth Fleet. No, but they're listening. Nira's voice was steady, clipped. She had the tone of someone used to dealing with threats without reacting to them. The man next to her, taller, dark eyes, gave us both a quick scan. Not hostile. Alert. We've read your broadcast. We've cross-referenced ID data and visual logs. You're not just fugitives. You're leverage, Nira said. That wasn't the plan, Avern replied. It never is. They ushered us aboard. The interior of the ship was Spartan. One central corridor, two cabins, and a cockpit patched with salvage parts. It smelled of oil, wiring, and recycled air. Nira led us to the rear hold and opened a wall panel. Inside was a communications terminal with a full link to a covert orbital relay. You've made noise. Karsa's command issued a planetary bulletin 2 hours ago. Your faces, your names, labeled as insurgents. I looked at Avern. She didn't react. She'd expected this. But, Nira continued, it backfired. There are groups off-world who've been waiting for a misstep from Earth Fleet leadership. You gave them one. Avern stepped forward. Then use it. Push the hearings. Demand an inquiry. Force the diplomatic council to act. Nira's gaze hardened. This isn't that simple. You want this to mean something, you have to stand in front of them. Testify. Publicly. I spoke up. That's suicide. Not if we move fast, Nira said. I have a corridor window. If we break Opmo in the next 90 minutes, we can dock at Helios Station before the black zones scramble interceptors. Avern turned to me. Her face was unreadable. This is your call too, she said quietly. She was offering me a choice. The first real one since I cut her down from that pole. I looked at her. You said if we do this, they'll kill everyone we meet. Yes. And if we don't, they win. Yes. I stepped back, sat down on the cold edge of the whole bench. Thought for a moment. I didn't sign up for this, I said finally. I know, but I'm not walking away either. Her hand found mine. Firm. No hesitation. We launched 42 minutes later. The ship climbed through the upper dust layers and into the black. As gravity faded, I sat across from Avern in the crew bay, watching her strap in. She was pale, exhausted, but the fire in her eyes hadn't gone out. I leaned forward. You think they'll listen to you up there? They'll have to. And if they don't, then we'll make them. The words didn't feel heroic. They felt necessary. Just before we crossed the threshold into orbital alignment, Nira turned back from the cockpit. One last thing she said. We intercepted an encrypted directive. Karsa's command issued a termination order. Not capture, eliminate. Both of you. Avern didn't blink. Let them try. The ship surged forward, stars spilling across the viewport. Below us, Karsa shrank into a blot of dust and rust. Behind us, silence. Ahead of us, judgment. Helios Station came into view like a steel halo above a fractured world. It spun in low orbit, bathed in artificial day, its outer rings layered in shield arrays and sensor clusters. Beneath it, the planet shimmered in quiet hostility. Karsus 9 still hunting ghosts. Nira's ship locked into the docking corridor under diplomatic priority clearance. Temporary, fragile. It would hold just long enough for us to make our case, or be silenced trying. As the airlock hissed open, Kale checked the magnetic clamp on his sidearm and looked at Avern. She had changed into a clean uniform, plain black, high collar, Velthur crest barely visible at her shoulder. She wore it not as a soldier, but as a survivor, Her hair was tied back. Her bruises, though faded, were still visible. She didn't hide them. They were part of the testimony now. They walked side by side through the sterile corridors of the station, escorted by Nira and her crew. Armed guards flanked key junctions, station security, not fleet. Unaligned, and for now neutral, the hearing chamber was smaller than Kale expected. A curved table, 7 seats filled. Humans, Velthiri, and 2 independent arbitrators. A diplomatic panel. Cameras embedded in the ceiling streamed every second to both factions' secure networks. Kale stood just behind Averin as she approached the center of the room. She didn't wait for permission. "My name is Averin Telvera, formerly of House Marnex. I was imprisoned by Earth Fleet authorities without charge. I was tortured, displayed, silenced for refusing to endorse an illegal treaty between the fleet and a Velthiri splinter regime." She spoke clearly, steadily. She recounted the moment of her capture, the fabricated charges, and Colonel Jarrett's execution order. She detailed her decision to act and how it condemned her to die publicly, exposed as a warning. Kale stepped forward when she faltered. He gave his account, factual, unemotional. He described Karsus, the guards, the moment he saw her hanging there. His voice broke once, brief, controlled, when he described her silence, her refusal to beg. Then he held up the data chip. "We have her medical scans, genetic verification, visual logs from a moment of extraction. This isn't theory. It's evidence." One of the panelists, a human diplomat in a crimson uniform, leaned forward. "You understand the accusations against you implicate high-ranking Earth officers in war crimes." "Yes," Averin said. "I do." "If proven true," the diplomat said, "this could fracture the Accords permanently. Then they were never built on anything real." The room fell silent. Another counselor, a Velthiri with amber eyes, spoke up. "You risked everything. For what outcome?" Averin turned slightly, glancing at Kale before answering. "For truth. For dignity. For a future where people like me don't disappear because it's convenient." They were escorted out as the council entered deliberation. 2 hours passed in silence. Kale paced the observation deck while Averin sat by the viewport, watching Earth rise on the station's far horizon. "You think they'll believe us?" Kale asked. "They have to," she said, "because if they don't, more like me will vanish." Nira returned just before the hour turned. "They're ready." The ruling was delivered without ceremony. The charges against Averin were dropped. Her citizenship status restored. The military tribunal that had ordered her execution was suspended. A special committee would review the entire Karsus chain of command. It wasn't justice. Not yet. But it was enough. Enough to start again. Kale exhaled slowly. His body finally let go of a tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Averin didn't smile. Not yet. But her shoulders lowered and her eyes cleared. She turned to him after the chamber emptied. "You're free to go," she said softly. "You always were." He looked at her, confused. "You could walk away now," she continued. "You don't owe me anything." He took a step closer. "I didn't do this because I owed you," he said. "I stayed because I couldn't go back to who I was before. And now," he paused. "Now, I want to see what we become." She reached for his hand. This time, she didn't hesitate, and he didn't let go. A week later, they left Helios together aboard a small diplomatic freighter. Destination, unregistered. Rumors spread fast about the alien woman who defied execution and the human who saved her. About evidence, betrayal, and the quiet war that played out far from the battlefield. But Kale and Averin didn't care about the stories. They cared about the silence between stars, and what it meant to share it, finally, without running.